Hey, Luyi, what's going on, brother? And Sharif, what up, dog? So I was typing and I decided that I'm just gonna record a video, um, because it's gonna be too much. Um, so and that way I don't have to worry about space and time and my little fingers cramping up and stuff like that. So let me say this. So your punches look great. The uppercuts, they had good power. They had good intensity. Um, the timing in your combinations were great. You had really good integration of. Let me get out this damn car. You had really good integration of uh, of footwork or stepping with the punching, and so um, let me turn around. That better. Okay, yeah. So you had a good integration of stepping with the punch, and that's important for getting reach. Because the thing about the uppercut is a short punch. Um, there's really no such thing as a long range uppercut. Um, Even the longest range uppercut is shorter than a straight cross. I mean, than a straight or a cross, because the elbow is bent when it's delivered. You know what I'm saying? So. Is considered a short punch. So by stepping, you get reach out of it, and you also get power too. I mean, I'm not talking about power. You also get speed, because what happens is an uppercut, because it's a circle, takes a little longer to reach its mark than a straight punch. Right? A straight punch, let's say, theoretically takes a quarter of a second to throw, and an uppercut, because of the arc, because of the shape of the punch, it probably adds another quarter of a second. You know what I'm saying? So it they say it takes twice as long to throw a hook and an uppercut than it takes to throw a jab or a cross. So by stepping, the faster you step forward, the faster that uppercut is. So if this is my hand, the uppercut travels this way, and it takes a half a second to get from here to there. If I step, that step adds a quarter of a second, right? So if I step forward a quarter of a second and then I throw a punch that's a half a second, Sharif, you the math guy. What is that? Uh, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So now I have a punch that takes a half a second to deliver, but it lands in half that amount of time because of the footwork. So um, the faster the footwork, the faster the punch. So there are a lot of guys who don't necessarily have fast hands, and so um, uh, even if you don't have fast hands, if you have fast footwork, you increase the speed of your punch. Now, here's another thing: if you have fast footwork going towards your opponent when you throw a punch, he uses his footwork to throw a punch at you. By counterpunching, you now are throwing an eighth of a second quick uppercut. Does that make sense? Okay, so I have an uppercut that theoretically takes half a second to pop. I take a step forward, which gives me a quarter of a second advantage, makes it a quarter of a second faster. As I do this, and my opponent is moving forward, and it takes him a half a second, a quarter of a second to throw his punch. He's coming this way. I'm coming this way. That punch is now an eighth of a second. So I saw something in one of the it was a Filipino martial arts forum, and discussing a uppercut a while back, and I didn't join in the discussion because I was stopped at a light. Uh, I meant to go back, and I'll probably go back and look for it, but the guy said you can only use a cross against a jab, um, because uppercut and hook and overhand are too slow. And that's a guy who's never been in a ring before, honestly, because just using the logic that I just told you about right now, he's moving towards me with a punch. I'm moving towards him with a punch. I don't casually step into my punch. I actually lunge or jump into my punch. And then I use a quick twist of the shoulder. Um, you know, this punch can be down to damn near a tenth of a second. You see what I'm saying? And so if a guy is throwing a jab, at the same time I throw an overhand or a hook, and I just carefully get my head out the way when I throw that hook, or move my head when I throw that uppercut, um, and I use the correct footwork, yes, a circular punch can beat a jab. And a circular punch is a great technique to beat a jab, because a circular punch has a lot more power than a jab. Okay, so that being said, um, that your step with the jab, with your uppercut was good. Your step with the jab and the uppercut was good, because that's something a lot of people don't do. A lot of people treat that uppercut as something that should be delivered from flat foot, which you could if you need more power. But leading off with it, or covering distance, we got a guy that's not going to let you get close to him. Stepping into it is a great thing, and you want to be able to throw punches that way, because a lot of people can't do it. So if you can do it, you have an advantage. Okay, so let's say about the footwork. Um, you asked for criticism. So criticism, I don't really have one, because you did really good. Um, the only thing I would say is something you already put in your email that you noticed was the hand dropping. Uh, well, let me add to that, because I noticed the hand dropped a little bit. That happens until you conscientiously get rid of that habit. Um, and as long as you're aware that you're doing it, um, you'll get rid of it. But when you're moving around, right? So when the guy's moving around, hand does this sometimes, right? As I'm moving around, my hands will drop, stuff like that. Okay, excuse me. So while you're dancing, the movement of hands, while I'm moving around, this is called, this is what boxers call a hole in a defense, or hole in his guard. And what that means is, as long as my elbows are down, protecting my sides, my hands are up, protecting my face, my shoulder is protecting my jaw, I'm using my knee every now and then to lower my height, which moves the target. I turn my shoulder, my footwork is, I'm going back and forth, right? I'll have to show you guys that footwork thing. As long as I'm moving, I have what is called a tight guard, or a tight defense. But if anything moves out of place, so meaning my foot stops moving, my head stops moving, my hand leaves my face, even just for a second, or split second, my hands wave around, like doing stuff like this. That's called a hole in defense. So imagine that there's a target, and then in front of the target there's another target. If this thing, I'm sorry guys to be turning this. No, let me put it back. Fuck. I just decided to do this, so I know this is crazy. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I got a target, put another target in front of it, and it moves around. My defense is tight. However, if for a second something happens and it peeks out a little bit, peeks out a little bit, peeks out a little bit, those are called holes in the defense. So right now, everything is covered. Shoulders covered my chin, hands covered the front of my face. I'm moving my body, right? This is all called covered. Now this hole right here, there's a diamond by turning, that closes that up. I turn, that closes that up. That's why boxers are always moving their bodies around, because this opening, I have to move it to make so that it's not being covered. But if my hand does this, those are opportunities to hit the target. So that's like this, where all of a sudden something peeks through and then it closes back up. You have to, what they call, pull the trigger. Got my hands up, I got a guy moving around, all of a sudden I notice his hand drops like this, just that much, and it comes back up, and he just that much. I see the hole. As soon as I see the hole, I need to shoot for it before it's covered back up. You get it? So that's what they call pull the trigger. With the jab, I need to be able to pull the trigger. Boom. I see a hand drop. Boom. I need to take advantage of it right away. Guy's got up. I see his hand come up. There's an opening right there. Boom. I got to be able to pull the trigger and hit those openings when they come open. So with your hands moving around, experienced fighters are trained to look for it. And so mostly when we look at a technique, when we look at fighters, most guys see, oh, he just threw a jab, he threw a cross, he threw a round kick, he threw a side kick. They plan their defense according to techniques being thrown. Experienced fighters look for holes in the defense. So even if I throw a jab, when I throw a jab, my ribs are open. Most people respond to the jab by blocking the hand. Experienced fighters respond to the jab and the hole at the same time. They respond to the jab and the hole. If I'm just moving around and there's a hole opens up, as soon as I notice it, and when I was point fighting, that was something I was pretty good at. And they used to call me a minute man. I know it's kind of an insult, but in point fighting, my friends used to joke that I was a minute man because I used to end all my bouts in less than a minute. You know, you have 3 minutes to score your 3 points or 5 points if you're a black belt. And I never took 3 minutes. If I took 3 minutes to beat a guy, he was really good, or I was gonna lose. If I made it to 3 minutes, I was probably losing. You know what I'm saying? Or a guy was running. The reason why is because I was real good at pulling the trigger. If I see something, hand drops, go just take a look at my videos on YouTube. Those YouTube videos, the fights, the three fights that I have, at that tournament, there was no 3-point rule or 5-point rule. We just did maximum points in 3 minutes. How many points you can get. So, but if you notice my fights, I don't waste time. Referee says go, doom, I jump right on it. Every time a guy drops his hand, every time he throws a strike, I attack. And that made me very successful. Now, that was a knockdown tournament that was in the Philippines. But, and matter of fact, in the Philippines, knockdown tournaments are like that's like the equivalent of point fighting here, because you had knockdown tournaments and knockout tournaments. And so I did more knockdown tournaments and knockout tournaments. I only did like I wouldn't say a handful, maybe like, I don't know, 10, 15 knockout tournaments. But knockdown, shit, I did one, sometimes 2 in a weekend. So I did one almost every weekend for like 2 years. But those knockdown tournaments, the guys that I was fighting, they were so good, if I didn't take them out early, they were going to beat me. And I did get beat quite a few times when I was over there. But what happened was it made me a better point fighter, because as a point fighter, I never allowed openings to go past without jumping on it. You know what I'm saying? So let me end this, and then I'm going to come right back to it, okay?